Grief is a powerful emotional and physical reaction to the loss of someone or something. It can be a complex emotion to process, and for children and teens, it's no different. During the pandemic, there has been more loss than ever for children. Thanks for joining us for this week's Health News You Can Use. I'm Lindsay Stish. Today we're talking about the impact grief can have, the importance of coping skills, and a special way St. Luke's Home Care and Hospice has been helping children and teens through grief for the past decade. With me today is Brian Pendleton, a chaplain and bereavement coordinator at St. Luke's Hospice House. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be with you again, Lindsay.
So first, Brian, how can grief impact a person, in particular a child?
Grief impacts the whole person. All of us as human beings, when we experience a loss, have impacts physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Physically, our sleep, our appetites, our ability to think can be impacted, certainly. Emotionally, the full range of human emotions, from deep, deep sadness and isolation to anger, are very common. And then spiritually and existentially, we can find ourselves questioning deeply held values that we once had and beliefs that were important to us as the result of grief. In terms of children in particular, children seem to have this capability that we as adults don't, in that they can turn grief on and turn grief off. And so for children, they can feel grief and mourn outwardly, express their grief in very significant ways, and then they can go and play. And so for children, finding ways to open them up, to allow them to mourn, to outwardly express that inner experience of grief is so key.
Mm-hmm. So can you give me some examples of things that might cause a child to grieve?
There are all kinds of things that can cause us to have a sense of loss. Certainly the loss of a loved one, the loss of a pet, the loss of a home. Economic dislocation of one kind or another, certainly a divorce in the family. These are all experiences that we feel deeply and that we grieve internally. With COVID-19, there's a whole host of other things, different layers of loss that people of all ages and children have certainly experienced related to school, related to activities, related to their relationships.
So why is learning coping skills so important?
The key is opening up. It's counterintuitive. It feels counterintuitive to say that to do the work of grief and to move forward in grief, one has to lean into it, even though it hurts. And we feel that sense of hurt and pain when we process our grief. But finding a way to open up that internal grief experience and to mourn, to outwardly express it, is so key if someone wants to move forward in a healthy way in their grief experience.
So St. Luke's Hospice House, in collaboration with the Girl Scouts of Northeast Kansas and Northwest Missouri, is holding an annual grief camp for kids. What can be expected at this camp?
We have a full range of activities, including art and woodworking, all kinds of outdoor play and experiences for children and young teenagers ages 5 to 14. And really the hope is to open up avenues of expression for grief. In grief work, we talk about grief is that internal experience of loss that all of us feel when we experience a loss of any kind. Mourning is that outward expression. And so the hope is to give these children and young adolescents the opportunity in a safe space with those that are their age to recognize that they're not alone, they're not the only ones experiencing loss, that loss is normal and natural, and the grief that they feel is normal and natural. There's nothing wrong with them. And to give them the space to open up and to express that grief in healthy ways that we hope they can build upon moving forward.
Okay. So if adults in a child's life are grieving, it's safe to say that they're grieving in their own way as well. How does this camp help parents support their child in that grief process?
One of the interesting things, Lindsay, that I have observed in 20 years of working in hospice is that oftentimes the most important conversations that we need to have are most difficult with those we're closest to. And so hopefully this camp will allow these children and teenagers to learn through modeling some coping skills, some tools that they can then take home with them, with their parents, their grandparents, their guardians, other family members, to open up that door of communication. Sometimes it's quite difficult for parents to talk to their children, to express openly their grief, to feel as if they need to somehow shield that or protect that from their children or their adolescents, when in reality finding a way to share that together and to be less isolated is really key and a really healthy thing. So we hope to provide those things for campers that they can then take home with them. And we invite parents at the end of the camp to join us for a final session that we hope will build that bridge. Okay, great. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add today? I would just say for anyone in our community, a grandparent, a parent, a guardian, if you have a child or an adolescent that you feel like is struggling due to a loss, I would just simply say feel free to reach out to St. Luke's Bereavement Office. Our number is 816-502-8917, and certainly there's someone available to listen. There are resources available, and we'd be happy to help. Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you. To learn more about the Express Yourself camp put on by St. Luke's Home Care and Hospice in collaboration with the Girl Scouts of Northeast Kansas and Northwest Missouri, visit stlukeskc.org/camp. You can also stay up to date with all the latest developments on the COVID pandemic and other health news from St. Luke's at stlukeskc.org/news. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time on Health News You Can Use.